to infinity and beyond.
This is me. This is how I win.
Were you rushing or were you dragging? Answer!
You're a wizard, Harry.
Say what again? Say what again? I dare you.
No, I am your father. Hasta la vista, baby.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
And here we go.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back inside the film room. Zach Goins here with Johnny Sobchak for the last episode of 2023. As we're recording this, the first episode of 2024, as you were listening to it. What a time, Johnny. The end of the year is come and gone at this point for our listeners. How are we feeling about 2023?
Thanks, Zach. Excited for the last show of the year here. I would say overall, thumbs up. 2 thumbs up, I dare say. In terms of, I think in the vast majority of what I saw this year between film and television, I think it was in most cases as good as I thought it would be or hoped it would be, and in some cases even better in a lot of times. So only a couple disappointments, I would say, like outright, like just letdowns. But overall, I think probably the best year since prior to the pandemic in terms of film and TV, again, being really, really solid as well.
Yeah, I think this was a very good year, I think. I always think of 2019 as being like one of the best recent movie years. And like that's, as you were just saying, the last year prior to the pandemic where everything was hitting on all cylinders. I will say, looking at 2022 and my top of, Top Gun, Batman, and Avatar 2, that's a pretty hard one to beat, but this was a great year, and we're going to be talking about a lot of the reasons why on this episode. With it being our recap of 2023, we're going to be sharing our top 10 movies of 2023. We're going to be handing out some end-of-year awards, and we're also going to be looking ahead and making some bold predictions about what's going to happen in the world of pop culture in 2024. You'll have to come back next week for our best TV shows of 2023, our final reflection on the year. Don't want to cram too much into one episode, but this is going to be a fun one. I'm excited to dive in and hear all of your thoughts and share some of my own. But before we get started, make sure, for all you listeners out there, make sure you're subscribed to our newsletter, The Rewind, so you can get podcast episodes, reviews on the website, social giveaways, all that sort of stuff delivered straight to your inbox. You can find that on our social pages at Inside Film Room or on the website, insidefilmroom.com. Make sure you're subscribed. You don't want to miss out. But Johnny, before we dive into everything, how are the holidays? It's our first time chatting since prior to, Christmas. The New Year is right here. What's been going on? How was everything? Any movie, TV, pop culture related gifts that are worth shouting out on the podcast? I know you usually get a pretty solid haul of movies.
Yeah, I was extremely fortunate this year in terms of, as some may already know, my birthday is also pretty close to Christmas. It's 1 month prior on the 25th of November. So I kind of double up in terms of some of the things I get, which is pretty awesome. But for Christmas, at least, I got a few different movies that I was really excited about, had on my list, so to speak. Some I've seen, some I haven't. I got the 4K for Clue, which came out not that long ago. I believe it was like last month. I don't know if you haven't seen Clue, it's a classic. You got to watch it. Super fun. Also got the 4K like special collector's edition for JFK, Oliver Stone's film, which again, pretty popular, but if you haven't seen it, highly recommend. Also got the 4K, which came out this year, Criterion collection of The Rules of the Game, which I actually haven't seen. That's kind of like a blind buy, but it's considered like one of the best movies ever made. So really looking forward to that. It's almost 100 years old, so super curious to see what that's like when I finally get around to it. And then my buddy Clint, I got to shout him out. My college roommate, still kind of like a roommate. He got me a few different criterions as well. He got me The Life Aquatic, um, Wes Anderson's film, which we watched together this year, as well as Seconds, which is a great film from the 60s with Rock Hudson. Super underrated, I think. I haven't really ever heard anyone talk about it too much. It's a John Frankenheimer film. So recommend that. And he also got me Scorsese's The Age of Innocence, which I also watched with him a few months ago prior to Killers of the Flower Moon, and really loved it. It's probably one of my top 5 Scorsese, I think, in terms of how much I enjoyed it and how good I thought it was. So yeah, I've been very, very lucky. And I also got, outside of movies, but still kind of connected to movies, I got from Reagan, my girlfriend, she got me, one of a few things she got me was the Mondo like collector's limited edition Oppenheimer vinyl, which was super cool. I've been considering getting into vinyl for a while now. It's just something I knew once I did it, I would like be into it and want to spend money on it. So I was kind of holding off. And Christmas, I guess, was just a good opportunity to really dip into it. So she got me that. Super, super cool. I got my own turntable and speakers already, and got that set up like within the week. So I'm really enjoying it so far. And then I also went ahead and got myself as my own kind of little Christmas present on top of that. I got the same kind of collector's limited edition of the Dune soundtrack. And I'm sure the part 2 soundtrack will be out here in the next couple of months. So I'll be on the lookout for that. But yeah, I got a new hobby to dip into, and I already got another soundtrack on the way, which I'll tell you about when I get it. But yeah, it was a great year. I mean, I couldn't have asked for more, honestly.
Awesome. We got a record player recently. Rebecca's grandma was like cleaning house, and so she had one. It's not like an old record player. It is just one that she had. So it's not like some collector's item, but we had both like toyed around with the idea of it, and we're like, oh sure, yeah, we'll take a free one. And same as you, like I've been like very into just like getting stuff now, like favorite albums and whatnot. The only soundtracks, the scores that I have so far, I got Beale Street, which is just incredible. And Her, which is like one of those good just like background musics, a little like synth vibe to it, but it's kind of, Rebecca doesn't like that one. She says it's too depressing, but then again, the movie is also extremely emotional. But no, that's a good haul. I didn't get any actual movies myself. Well, I take that back. Before Christmas, I got 2 for myself. 2 movies that I shockingly have never seen. I got the 4Ks. They're on sale for Terminator 2 and Heat, which I know are both like 2 movies that are just like all-time classics and constantly referenced in the group chat. I've seen the first Terminator, but I never watched the second one, which obviously I know is like a defining action film. So looking forward to both of those. But as far as like on Christmas gifts that I received, a lot of like pop culture adjacent stuff. I've always been a Lego kid. So, but I'm always like, now that I'm an adult, I'm like, I can't justify spending $100 on a Lego for myself or something, just to build it and have it sit on the shelf. Yeah. So, Rebecca's brothers, who are also Lego people, they got me the like Harry Potter castle, like the Hogwarts, not like the big one that you like have with the minifigures and like play with, like move them around the castle and whatnot, but it's like the quote unquote like adult version that's like a miniature sort of like a model. So I got that, been building that over the last couple days. I got a book. I know I talked about this a lot on the podcast for the OC, one of my all-time favorite shows that I binged over the last like 2 years. And they just came out at the end of November with the OC, the oral history, and it's like interviews with, so like for the 20th anniversary, it's interviews with the showrunners and creators and all the cast and everything, and it just kind of breaks it all down. So for someone who like came to the show late and didn't experience it like in the prime, like 2003 to 2007 run, it's very insightful to read all of this like information that fans at that time probably already knew. But for me coming to it so late, it's like all revolutionizing my view on it. But so I'm only about like 40-ish pages into that since I just got it, but that's been a good one so far. And then I think the last thing I got this was a shirt that came out like back summer 2019, mentioning that great year of movies, Midsummer. When A24 released like just their logo t-shirt with A24 on it, but it's got like the flower embroidered like May Queen logo. And I remember like it sold out so quick. People were like reselling them on eBay for like $150, but they finally restocked. I did not pull the trigger on any eBay resales, and Rebecca was able to get one for me at face value this time around. So
Wow.
patience paid off there. And excited to have that in my wardrobe for one of my favorite movies. So a lot of fun stuff. Really excited about it all. But yeah, it was a good haul. I know you'll be spending your next I don't know, days, weeks, months watching all those movies you got, but what have you been watching lately over the last couple weeks leading into the holidays?
Man, I'll tell you what, I December is definitely the month, especially as someone that like does awards voting. Like you gotta make time and like
You
cram
just got to grind it out, man.
and also I dedicate, as someone with a full-time job and fortunate to have a good amount of PTO, like I do dedicate at least a couple days of PTO plus the days we get off for the holiday in this month. So I get a little extra time to spend on movies and shows. So in terms of new stuff like 2023 releases, that was my primary focus, for voting. I got in some pretty big films that had been very much hyped up and films that I'd been looking forward to all year. That included Jonathan Glazer's The Zone of Interest, his first movie in 10 years. There was also Dream Scenario from A24, starring Nicolas Cage. The Boy and the Heron from Miyazaki, again, his first movie in like 10 years as well. The Holdovers, The Iron Claw, Wonka, Chalamet, of course, from Paul King, and then All of His Strangers. Those were my first watches. I'll be touching on pretty much all of those later on, but in terms of how I felt watching a lot of these movies, I thought that they were all almost entirely like very good, like very strong. There were some that I didn't care about as much. I'm not even going to bother to mention those because we have so much to talk about.
Right.
Definitely wanted to shout out each of those specifically as movies that I certainly would recommend and I had a good time with to varying degrees. So, yeah, it was very productive in terms of some rewatches. Again, we'll go into everything, but definitely want to mention The Abyss. I saw that in the remastered re-release, which they had in Dolby theaters as a one night only kind of event. Absolutely,
it was so sad though because it was only the one in Charlotte was like, it was only at North Lake, right? And it was at 6 p.m. and I was like, I just can't get there. Like I work till 5:30. That's like 25 minutes away from me. I can't get there in time because I'd never seen that. So I was wanting to check it out, but they only had 6 p.m. screenings.
Yeah, it was a bummer. It's unfortunate that they didn't have like a wider opportunity for people to see it. But as someone who did get to see it, thankfully, I think I flexed my schedule if I remember correctly, so I could actually get off a little bit early to see it. So yeah, it was fantastic. It was only the second time I've seen that movie, so it was my first rewatch, and I previously watched it like in 2020, I think. I'm a big James Cameron fan. Obviously, Avatar came out last year, which I thought was a masterpiece. And The Abyss is one of my favorite movies from him. I wouldn't put it on the same level as like a Titanic or Avatar, or like Way of Water, but I think it's fantastic. And the re-release, if you didn't get to catch that, the remaster version of the movie, which is what they had in Dolby, is coming out on 4K Blu-ray in March. So I can't wait. I will definitely be pre-ordering that and getting that. I definitely recommend checking out. If you haven't seen it, I think you will enjoy it, especially if you're a James Cameron fan. And then in terms of some just Christmas movies that I try to watch every year, three of the big ones: Eyes Wide Shut from Kubrick, of course, as kind of like an off-kilter, not really a Christmas movie, but set at Christmas time. I love and get a kick out of that. And then Klaus on Netflix, of course, which I would still love to see get a physical release at some point, like a 4K or Blu-ray. I think it's an incredible movie and probably my favorite outright Christmas movie ever, even over a lot of the classics. I think it's just a perfect encapsulation of everything that I love about Christmas and told in a really fun way. And then Carol from Todd Haynes from 2015, of course. This movie like gets better like every time I watch it, I feel like. And if you haven't seen it, definitely recommend it. Again, it's one of those that's not really about Christmas, just set at Christmas, but it's a beautiful movie. A lot of Christmas aesthetics and whatnot, and just a very enjoyable film overall. A great melodrama, like a Cirque kind of film. So definitely recommend those.
Sounds like you've been busy, and I totally hear you on that last minute cram session with the award season, with the screeners piling up. Like, you just gotta plan out your day, plan out your weekends with like, okay, we're hitting 2 movies this day, we're hitting 3 movies this day. I was looking at my letterbox at like the diary to see just like the numbers, and so far, I know we're recording this on the 30th, so I've got a day and a half left. So far I'm at 18 movies this month, which I hit 16 in July, which was when I was in the prime of my Mission Impossible rewatch leading up to Dead Reckoning. So that took up like 7 of those spots. But uh it was a lot. So here's what we've got. I phased out TV a little bit. I know I talked this year about being like a lot more balanced with my TV versus movies split. So on the TV front, I finished Survivor 45, had been keeping up with that weekly. Still a diehard fan. This was a fantastic season, a wonderful cast, a very, very deserving winner. So excited to see Redacted take home the $1 million there. No spoilers here. But kicked off Percy Jackson and the Olympians. I've always been a Greek mythology kid. Loved those books. The movies were fine, but I'm excited to see. I know I'm no longer the target audience for this, having phased out of this being like 12, 13-year-olds, but you bet I'm still going to watch. I've watched the first 2 episodes there, and it's fun. And then started a new show on Paramount Plus called Colin from Accounts. It's like an Australian sitcom that aired in Australia and then was acquired by Paramount and is on Paramount Plus there. It's a similar sort of like Ted Lasso-y like comedy style, but it's maybe a little darker and not as wholesome. But it's been a lot of fun. I've watched 3 or 4 episodes there. The full season is out, if anyone wants to check that out. But on the movie front, new releases, I checked out Anyone But You at the theaters. I had to go see that sweet rom-com between Glenn Powell and Sydney Sweeney, and it was like pretty average, but I'm a sucker for a rom-com, so even though it was average, I still enjoyed it. Could have been a lot better. Saw Poor Things, Zone of Interest, loved Iron Claw. We'll be talking about that one in a bit, I'm sure. The Holdovers, new Christmas classic. The Boy and the Heron, caught up with Past Lives. And for Rebecca's birthday, we watched Mamma Mia, one of her all-time favorites. I had never seen that before, so it was good to see her just like vibing with it. She watches so many movies with me, so to see her in her element with one of her favorites was amazing. And then on our last episode, I believe we talked about, following up the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, really doing that Hunger Games rewatch. So finished that out, watched Catching Fire, Mockingjay Part 1 and Part 2. That quadrilogy is pretty fantastic across the board. I remembered being very down on the Mockingjay movies. They're still not as good as Catching Fire. That's the pinnacle of this franchise. But coming back with like a more adult perspective, Part 1 was great as like a political thriller. Really enjoyed that. And then Part 2, capping it all off, was a lot of fun. So have much better feelings about the franchise as a whole after this rewatch. Rewatched a classic, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, always a good time. And then the only holiday movies that I got into were my 2 favorites, Home Alone and Home Alone 2. Had to throw those on and get in the festive spirits. Still a big fan of Kevin McAllister, always hits. So like you, very busy with the movies this month, but a lot of really fun watches there.
Beautiful. Yeah. And on the TV front, I pretty much regressed in December. Really didn't make too much time for TV. We don't vote on it or anything, but I also, with Reagan being a little out of commission for a couple weeks there, we kind of got behind on some of the shows we were keeping up with, like The Curse or For All Mankind. So I'll be getting caught up with those here shortly. But yeah, definitely a lot going on as you can see and hear the past 4 weeks or so.
Yeah, I'm still I fell behind on The Curse, fell behind on Monarch, so I need to catch up, get back on track with both those because I'm still invested in them and just need to sit down and see them through. But now we'll be able to hopefully binge them all by the time we're catching up. But that's enough about TV, Johnny. Let's get down to business, to the main event of this episode. We're talking the best movies of 2023. We've alluded to some of these throughout our little recap here to kick things off. But what we're going to do, if you've listened to one of these episodes before, you know, we've done this for years now. But we're going to take a look back on the year in movies. We're ranking our top 10 favorites from 2023. We'll be counting down from 10 to 1, alternating between the two of us. But if a movie is on both of our lists, we can talk about it together just for the sake of time. Don't necessarily have to reveal where we have it on our list until we get to that spot in the countdown. But we can talk about it together just for the sake of conversation. So, Johnny, I'm going to let you kick things off here with number 10. How are we feeling?
Do we want to touch on honorable mentions real quick?
Yes. So, you know, great call. We have a couple listed out here. Totally skipped over that on the old Google Doc. What do you have for honorable mentions?
Yeah, so for me, just a couple films here that I thought, I guess technically like 4 films here that I thought were fantastic or great, but just not quite in my top 10. That includes Cord Jefferson's American Fiction, really great movie that I'm looking forward to even rewatching here at some point in the next couple of months. May December, which I saw for the first time at New York Film Festival back in like late September, early October. Really special memory with that movie, which definitely helps. But the movie itself, it just has stuck with me. I mean, months later. So if you haven't checked that out, definitely recommend it. And then also from Netflix, The Killer, David Fincher making his proper comeback. Great to see it. Love to see it. And was lucky enough to see that with you in theaters this year, which was pretty awesome, before seeing out Netflix. And then lastly, Past Lives from Celine Song. Definitely one of the more emotional movie going experiences for me this year. Definitely a great directorial, feature debut from Song. And, I'm excited to see how she progresses and what she does next.
Absolutely. That is one of mine as well. Just missing out on my top 10. I had Past Lives at number 11 this year. Loved that. I caught it very late. I know it came out earlier in the year, but didn't watch until this past month when I was watching my screeners. Another one I came to late, Infinity Pool. This was a January release, maybe?
That was the first movie I saw in a theater this year. Yeah.
Well, it was one of the last I saw, and I was all in on it. I know you were shocked that I enjoyed it this much. But it was just a very unhinged movie, and I was all about it. Alexander Skarsgård and Mia Goth were unreal. So was super glad to have been able to fit this one in and just miss out on my top 10 here. All of Us Strangers, another one that came out towards the end of the year, and I was able to catch. Just a devastating, haunting movie here. Paul Mescal and Andrew Scott are both fantastic in it. Man, this Paul Mescal needs to put some pep in his step and give us a cheery movie. Maybe Gladiator 2 will flip the script for him next year, but he keeps ripping our hearts out. And then finally, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Just talked about The Hunger Games. I think this movie was fantastic because I was a fan of the book. We did a whole episode about it. If you want more details, you can go and check that out. And also the review on the website. But it was a lot of fun. I was a fan of the book, liked the movie even more, I would say, than the book. And then, as I just mentioned, it put me into this deep dive back into the Hunger Games universe where I rewatched all these movies. And I think that was a really powerful thing for this movie to make me so reinterested in everything that I went back and watched them all. So those are my honorable mentions. A lot of good stuff, but it's about to get even better. Johnny, talk to us. Number 10.
Oh man. I'm gonna say Anatomy of a Fall from Justine Triet. This is a movie that had been hyped up pretty much all year, coming out of Cannes Film Festival in May. Won the Palme d'Or, so was really looking forward to it. Finally caught it in my local art house cinema a couple months ago, and one of those movies that really inspires like conversation and discussion. Reagan and I talked about it like the rest of the night. I felt like after we saw it with our different interpretation and thoughts on it. So always great when a movie can do that. And I thought definitely loaded with some of the best performances of the year, with Sandra Hüller, of course, being the standout. Definitely one of the probably top 5 performances I've seen this year, and just maybe even the best original screenplay of the year as well. And how well they ride the line in this kind of murder mystery, but not really about being a murder mystery in some ways. So yeah, that's my number 10.
I still have yet to watch that. It's definitely high on my list.
Bro,
Dude,
I
calm
told
down.
you.
I know you told me on the day when I was like, I'm gonna watch 4 movies this day, and surprise, I didn't get to watch all 4 movies. However, it's not a disinterest thing. It's we're just talking about how much we have to cram, and when we're looking at the old schedule, would I rather watch an hour and 45 minutes All of Us Strangers, or 2 hours and 32 minutes Anatomy of a Fall? It was just like a cost benefit analysis at that point of like needing to get more movies in. So it'll still be like one of the first ones that I'm watching, in the next couple days. But didn't see it in time to make the cut here. So apologies, King. But what I do have at number 10 is Theater Camp. You're just talking about a stirring, dramatic murder mystery, and I have something equally as powerful, which is a bunch of theater kids. And this movie was so very much like up my alley that I was the perfect target for it. I caught this late. I watched it in like September, but it came out earlier in the year. I want to say it was at Sundance. It was at some festival, I think, but it's the directorial debut from Molly Gordon and Nick Lieberman. Love Molly Gordon. She's in The Bear. She was in Booksmart, one of my all-time favorites. And this felt very similar to Booksmart, not just in like the overlap in cast, but just the way it was shot, the vibe, the humor. And I thought this was just a hysterical movie, also very tender and heartwarming. And with just like a fantastic cast. Jimmy Tatro, my king, I voted for you. I nominated you for best actor. I needed that. You're just a perfect himbo, and I love it so much. But it's got a great soundtrack. That's what you need to get for your vinyl. You need to get the record so you can listen to Camp Isn't Home on repeat. But it's fun. It's on Hulu. Go check it out if you haven't seen it yet. It's just an all-around blast. So that's my number 10, Theater Camp. Johnny, back to you.
Wow. Yeah, I guess that's when I still got to check out.
Yeah, you haven't seen my number 10 either.
Wow. Look at us. Number 9. This is, I will say, like up to this point, like through the next few spots, like I feel like they're almost interchangeable. So I just want to like shout that out. But next is going to be John Wick Chapter 4. I had pretty, big reservations about this movie because I was, I guess, maybe in the minority in saying that I thought Chapter 3 was not that great. Parabellum, I thought was a downturn for the series up to that point. I loved the first 2. And then I wasn't crazy about the third. So why would I be excited for this? But still went into it, obviously, was excited to check it out and see what they were cooking. And it absolutely blew me away. And I thought was like kind of easily the best movie out of the whole series. And I've seen it a couple times now in Dolby. I thought it was just like kind of an action masterpiece, like anything you would want in an action movie, in terms of style, in terms of, how John Wick could evolve through 4 movies and get to this level. I thought it was just handled extremely well. And I think that it goes out on a high note, and I hope it's going out on a high note, and that they don't do any more, at least for the foreseeable future. Cause I think you're not really gonna be able to top this. And this is the action movie of the year, in my opinion, which I didn't imagine myself really saying when the year started, but I'll touch on that a little bit later in the show.
John Wick, big fan. It was great. did not make my list. Actually, I have this at 27. So significant difference from number 9 here. But I have liked these movies all the way through. Was a big fan of Chapter 3, and then thought this one was a great way to hopefully, like you said, finish out the franchise for the time being, at least. I know we've got the ballerina. Are they still doing the ballerina spinoff?
Oh, they sure are. Yeah.
With Ana de Armas, right? I think she was the lead. But my number 9 was Barbie. We got a full episode about this, so I won't say too much. Feel free to go and check that out. But Barbie was a ton of fun. Margot Robbie's fantastic. Ryan Gosling is fantastic. Saw this one twice in theaters. It's a cultural phenomenon and just an all-around good time at the movies. Fantastic ensemble cast across the board. Fun music, great production design, great costumes, all the jazz there. Really excited to see Greta Gerwig continue to flourish. I don't know if she I know she's got Narnia lined up next at Netflix.
Yeah.
I'm not particularly excited about that, but apparently she is. So that makes me excited that it's something we've seen what she can do, and it's something that she's very passionate about. So hopefully we can keep that momentum going. But yeah, loved Barbie, had a lot of fun with it. Yeah, that's all. Back to you, number 8.
Barbie, I mean, it was definitely a great movie. Definitely one of the biggest, best highlights of the year. So didn't quite make my list, but I would say it's probably an honorable mention for me as well. Next, I will shout out Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, my number 8 spot. I mean, for not most of the year necessarily, but this was my number 1 movie of the year when I saw it, which was back in like May. So, you know, it definitely made an impact on me. I love the Guardians of the Galaxy characters and the first 2 films. Big James Gunn fan. I loved the Suicide Squad as well. So I was excited to see him go from that back to this and see kind of how that maybe changed up his style or what he was going to do with the story. And I think we got the darkest, maybe most disturbing MCU movie ever with this movie. There's definitely some heavy material in here, but he still manages to make it a good time. And I think that it just makes me more confident and excited to see what he does next with Superman. So yeah, Rocket Raccoon honestly might be the MCU GOAT. And I thought that to land the conclusion of this trilogy the way Gunn did, especially in the wake of the Infinity War and Endgame movies, I thought was very well done. Probably his biggest accomplishment yet. So I was very sad. I sobbed at the end of this movie the first time I saw it. But yeah, I think it's just what you want to see in a comic book movie in a year where comic book movies took a turn for the worse. I think we can agree.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. This was the 4 honorable mentions I had up there. This would have been number 5. Came in at 15 on my list. And you have been ride or die with the Guardians since day one. I've never been like the biggest fan of the movies as a whole, but this was absolutely far and away the best one. And for good reason. You mentioned it. This is exactly what comic book movies are supposed to be in the downturn of this year where, you know, everywhere you look, it's just like Marvel in shambles. This reminded us just how fun and creative and absurd everything should be in these movies that are literal, like ridiculous, bright, colorful comics coming to life. So love that as a solid send-off. Guardians was fantastic, this third one. For me, looking at number 8, it's one of your honorable mentions, so we switched up there. But The Killer, I've always been a big David Fincher fan, especially when he is, you know, on his serial killer, dark, gritty bullshit, which I am all about. We had a full episode about this one, so if you want more details, go tune into that. But this movie was a lot of fun and not really at all what I don't think either of us expected. As far as, you know, it being about a contract killer, it was a lot more mundane and about the like meticulous nature of this obsessive person and how they do their work rather than the work that they do. It has that one brutal action sequence, but other than that, it's not, a shootout or anything like that. A just good character study of Michael Fassbender's character, of the killer, the titular killer. But excited after Mank to have Fincher back on his grind with something like this, and really hit the mark for me. No pun intended. Sniper joke.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Like you said, I mentioned this in my honorable mentions. Great film. Technically one of the most impressive of the year, I would say. The sound, the editing, cinematography, and as you said, just on top of that all, it's a very, I think, almost like it's a fun character study at the end of the day, with some darker humor and elements to it. So good call there. Number 7 for me, I'm gonna go ahead with The Boy and the Heron for Miyazaki. Got to catch this in IMAX, which was a very unique, kind of surreal experience, to be honest with you, because I have only seen a few of his movies, just a handful, and I've seen them only at home, of course. And so to see a movie of his, not only in theaters, but on a huge IMAX screen, like, it was so overwhelming, like, visually. And it was a very, very cool experience. Probably one of the coolest experiences I had in theaters this year. And on top of that, I thought it was one of his better movies of the few that I've seen. And obviously one of the better movies of the year. I thought it is definitely out there. It's definitely a Miyazaki movie in terms of the character design and the story, and the themes, and it's a very fitting last movie for him, if it is his last movie, which obviously I hope it isn't, but I think he would definitely be going out on a high note. I know that you didn't care for this movie as much, but I think if you see Miyazaki, in some ways, I think is kind of an acquired taste. I don't think you have to see him when you're a kid to see him necessarily, because I didn't. But I think you definitely have to kind of get on his wavelength. And you maybe will never get on his wavelength.
Not on the wavelength.
You gotta take some time to get there, because yeah, I could definitely see people maybe being a little weirded out. But I will say, as a kind of another factor here, I thought the dubbing with the English language dub, I thought was very well done, especially, as everyone knows, the Robert Pattinson voice acting as the Heron. I thought he was so funny, and so well done, and the whole cast overall, including someone who hasn't gotten enough attention, Florence Pugh, I thought absolutely knocked it out of the park as well, and was honestly maybe just as impressive as Robert Pattinson. So yeah, I think overall this is one of the more fun, even emotional, and just overall unique films that came out this year.
Yeah, it, like you mentioned, I have not seen any Miyazaki movies before. So shame on me, but this was not, a good place to start, it seems. I feel like, I don't know if they're all like at
Yeah.
this level. But I didn't really know what to expect going in. I don't have any experience with him. I don't have any experience with, like, I've never been like someone who watches anime. Not that, I don't know if this would be considered anime in like that sense, but just like
Mm.
Japanese, or like any like that sort of animation style that um I just like no familiarity with it, or like the storylines or the tropes or the way that it works. So was going in pretty blind here. And also the screener that we were provided, I did not see this in IMAX. I watched it at home. Was only the subbed version.
Right.
So I missed out on all of the Robert Pattinson and Florence Pugh and Mark Hamill, all that good stuff that you were mentioning. Which I feel like would have helped, if this was already inaccessible, that would have been like a big step to help make it more accessible. But instead I was over here reading subtitles. So, just really disconnected it from the same experience that you had. But for me, number 7 is one that we can both agree on here as being one of the best movies of the year, Johnny, and that's The Holdovers. Like I said off the bat when we were talking about everything that we'd watched, this is a new Christmas classic. It's a new classic in general. But just an amazing movie. Paul Giamatti is fantastic. I am obsessed with Dominic Sessa as this breakout role, as Angus, Divine Joy Randolph as well. I know she's the leader for supporting actress, as she should be. Just great cast across the board. You know, beautiful, thoughtful movie that is just so emotional and stirring and takes you on quite the journey going, how am I gonna care for this curmudgeon that is just so despicable at the beginning of the movie, such a pain, and then to see them over the course of this movie come together, learn to understand each other, and by the end of the movie have you in tears over their relationship. um it's just so good. I know you were a big fan. You just rewatched this last night, didn't you?
Yeah, I thought it was incredible the first time I saw it a couple weeks ago, and then yes, I rewatched it, showed it to Reagan last night. Great Christmas vibes, obviously, so I thought it was a good time to do it, and I think it honestly might be a masterpiece. I think it's rewatching a second time, like knowing what to expect. It's all just so it's such a well-oiled machine, and in terms of the acting and the characters, and just the whole aesthetic, the 70s kind of aesthetic to it,
Hmm.
it all comes together in such a satisfying way, and the vibes emanating off this movie are pretty hard to top. That's why it's my honestly might be my number three, top three film of the entire year.
It's definitely going to be one that is rewatched every December in my household. So I'm excited to, if I don't revisit it before then, at the very least next December, we'll have more 4.5, maybe 5-star logs on Letterbox for this one. But number 6, what are you thinking here?
Oh, we're getting down to it here. I in my number six spot have put Poor Things, Yorgos Lanthimos's latest film. It's out in theaters right now. It's kind of expanding, is my understanding. Should be seeing this this weekend. As we're recording this, I'm going to be seeing it again. This is another film I saw at the New York Film Festival. And again, have some great memories associated with that. Uh, and I'm very curious to see how it holds up on a rewatch. I thought it was fantastic the first time I saw it, and filled with some of the best performances of the year, filled with some of the most mind-blowing production elements of the year, from the costume design to the production design. Overall art direction is out of this world. The score is very unorthodox and very well done. And I think just the story, I know it's an adaptation of a novel. I just think that the story, the concept is very fun and very well done. And not only is it fun, but it also has some interesting commentary and things to say. So, um, and frankly, I went into it, without much in terms of knowledge or like expectation. I think that was the best way to do it. So, go ahead and check it out. Don't read too much about it. And I think that this, for me, there's a lot of similarities, I think, in parallels you can draw to like Barbie, for example.
Hmm.
Very different movies, the different aims and audiences, obviously. But I think in terms of storytelling, I found this to be one of the more satisfying films of the year, and character development with Bella Baxter, Emma Stone was just top notch.
I liked Poor Things. I didn't love it. Um, I think it was a solid like 3-star, maybe 3.5 for me. So it didn't make my top 10. Thought Emma Stone is fantastic in it, but it was a bit too. I know this is a common theme on this podcast. You were talking about the boy and the heron a minute ago, but this is a bit too absurdist and surrealist for me. And
Oh.
it is what it is, Johnny. It is what it is. But still enjoyed it enough, but didn't make my top 10. But my number 6 is much more grounded in the cold devastation of reality. And that is the absolutely heartbreaking movie, The Iron Claw. Um, Another one that came in hot at the end of the year. This is Zac Efron, Jeremy Allen White, Harris Dickinson, the wrestling movie Holt McCallany, I think that's how you say his last name. Our king from Mindhunter.
Oh yeah.
But the true story of the Von Erich family, a wrestling family, back in the 80s, and just the absolute devastation that unfolds within their family tree. Just tragedy after tragedy, and Zac Efron is an outstanding talent in this movie. for anyone who still thinks that he's the guy from High School Musical, or the guy from Baywatch or some of those other movies that he did. Yeah, he can still be that guy when he wants to play a fun comedy, but this was just shocking how impressive he was at the emotional turmoil and drama that he has to carry in this movie. The amount of pain, and that's equally shared by his brothers on screen, and Jeremy Allen White and Harris Dickinson. This, for someone who had no context of what this family was, like I have wrestling context, having worked with AEW and being involved in like modern wrestling, but not as much of the history. I didn't know what all was going to happen here, and it just keeps coming. And the fact that I went on a deep dive on Wikipedia afterwards and found out that there were even more tragedies that they didn't include in this movie because they quote unquote thought it would make it too unbelievable, when in fact that is real life, is just like shocking and devastating. But this movie, it's so fun in the first act. Is it kind of introduces you to this family, this like fun brotherly love, and then just absolutely rips your heart out over and over again throughout the last 2/3 of the movie. And man, I'm excited to watch it again, even though I know that it's gonna hurt. But I think that's the mark of a good movie.
Yeah, I would say this would be another honorable mention of mine. I could throw in there. I certainly agree with everything you're saying. I thought that I will say I do understand people who would argue that this could almost have been better as a like limited series, like on HBO or something. I think that would have been like the perfect format for this type of story. I think there could have been Emmy wins all around for the cast and crew if they had taken that approach, because there is so much to this family and this story. And having seen the documentary episode, The Dark Side of the Ring, about the Von Erichs, there's so many other elements. And like you said, there was a whole brother that they had to leave out. I think in terms of the character development and just exploring all the different facets of their life and the things they went through as wrestlers and as a family, professionally and personally, I think that would have been better. It does feel a little bit tight, and I think that's what holds it back a little bit from being like, truly like amazing. But in terms of performances and the ensemble, I mean, you can't deny, Zac Efron, as you're saying, I think deserves an Oscar nomination potentially. Harris Dickinson, I thought was fantastic, and just the whole ensemble was one of the best of the year. So hopefully A24 can keep up the hype, keep the train rolling there. But for me, my number 5 slot, and in your number 5 slot, we'll go ahead and break down real quick our thoughts on Killers of the Flower Moon. Martin Scorsese, one of the more anticipated films, not just of this year, but I would say over the last several years, knowing that he was doing this, developing it in like the midst of the pandemic. A lot of folks were excited for this, and premiered at Cannes in the springtime. Had to wait a while to see it, obviously in October. And I think we can agree probably mostly that it was worth the wait.
Yeah, talk about a limited series. Am I right? Just kidding. I'm not going to be one of those people who posts the guide of how to watch The Irishman in 6 parts. God. However, this movie was fantastic. I have it currently as my second Scorsese, behind Wolf of Wall Street. I haven't seen as many as you, but was a big fan. Leo is amazing. Lily Gladstone, breakout star, fantastic performance there. And it's just like, I'm sensing a theme of like devastation on my list. Between the Iron Claw, the Holdovers, this just emotional turmoil is a big theme here. But this was fun, but also infuriating and upsetting. The performances across the board: Robert De Niro, Jesse Plemons coming in hot in that second half. Big fan of this one. What were your thoughts, Johnny? Obviously, high praise, being number 5 on the year.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen like at this point like 15 or 16 Scorsese films, I think. And I really enjoy almost all of them, I'd say, to varying degrees. I would say that this is one of his best films. It's certainly I think it might be his longest movie. I didn't mind that at all. Honestly, when I walked out of it and my family walked out, it didn't feel that much longer than, any other 2.5 or 3 hour movie. And this one's almost 3.5 hours. So I thought honestly that being part of the discussion so much was kind of lame, but um I think that I'm excited to revisit this one. I'm really interested to see how it performs, for Apple TV Plus once it's out. And I'm also hoping and looking forward to Paramount doing a physical release. I would hope next year,
Mhm.
4K. Um, is definitely one that I think is worth revisiting and exploring more in depth because it's such a dense, kind of sprawling story. But yeah, I think the only thing I would say is that I do need to see it again to really digest it in full. I think
Mhm.
that
Have
just
you only seen it the one time? Because
I've only seen
I've
it
only
one
seen it
time.
once.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think that is something I need to do. I would say of the run that he's been on since 2013 was like The Wolf of Wall Street. He had that, and then he had Silence, and then he had The Irishman, and then he had this. Um, I think that those three movies, they're all about on the same level for me. I would say The Irishman and Silence are probably my top two Scorsese films, like overall. So I'd probably put them just ahead of this one. But he's been on such an impressive streak lately. I mean, it's mind blowing at his age what he's still able to do, the energy he has, which is very much apparent on screen in the performances and the editing. Um, it's like it seems like kind of effortless or like par for the course for him, but you still have to appreciate just how impressive and kind of monumental a lot of what he's doing in this movie is.
Absolutely. And shout out to Leonardo DiCaprio for occasionally slipping in like a little bit of Rick Dalton, which made me extremely happy as a Once Upon a Time in Hollywood fan. So big fan, great movie. Excited to rewatch this. Rebecca and I almost threw it on last night, and Rebecca was like, "Can we watch it in installments?" And I was like, "No, absolutely not." So that was number five for both of us. Number four, what you got, Johnny?
My number four pick is going to be The Zone of Interest from Jonathan Glazer. Um, it's interesting. It's not a competition, obviously, and I would not directly compare some of these films necessarily, but um, it's interesting to look at how some of these big films, Killers of the Flower Moon, Zone of Interest, even Oppenheimer to some extent, there are these historical analyses and critiques and examinations of atrocity, not just in American history with Killers of the Flower Moon, but obviously Zone of Interest, has a very interesting approach to it. Jonathan Glazer, I've only seen his last film, which was Under the Skin. And I only saw it like 10 years ago when I was really just getting into the film. And I think it's a great film. This is so different. And this is almost like a museum like installation almost. Like that's the experience that you get like watching this movie. It's basically like if you went into a museum and they were like, oh, like experience what it was like for the
Mm-hmm.
officer living at Auschwitz, like during the Holocaust. Like what would that have been like with him and his family? And it's definitely in terms of just visceral discomfort, like the opening of this movie and just a couple other sequences that happen like throughout the movie, like it can feel in terms of critique, I would say with that museum kind of installation feel, it can seem a little repetitive maybe at times. Or it's easy to just kind of gloss over like certain sequences that maybe don't stand out or aren't as strong as the others. But for me, the highlights, like the peaks of this movie, are so like viscerally like upsetting and like gave me goosebumps at times and like made me almost like dizzy at times in terms of the experience. And this was just watching at home on a DVD. Like I can't imagine watching this. I'm almost glad I didn't see it in a theater, at least on my first watch, because it would have been, I think, a little overwhelming. But I think that in terms of the direction, the concept for this film, it's adapted from a novel, but I think the concept itself, the story is pretty different, or been changed quite a bit. And I think that just speaks to Jonathan Glazer, his power behind the camera as a director. Um, and I think that there's nothing else like it. I mean, this year, certainly, I don't know if there's really anything else like it I've seen, at least in the last several years. Um, I think even if you don't necessarily have to like it or enjoy it, but I think it's a worthwhile watch in terms of not just obviously the historical significance and the historical kind of analysis going on, but the formal elements. The cinematography is some of the best of the year. The editing um, is really powerful, and the ending of this movie, I literally couldn't stop thinking about it for like 2 days after I watched it, and I still am thinking about this movie. I probably could have watched it again right after, just because I was so like I wanted to like examine like so many different parts of it I couldn't take it all in really the first time. It's just kind of overwhelming. But yeah, I think you saw this as well, Zach. We have very differing experiences, I would say, with it. Um, but I'm curious to see. It's in theaters or it's coming to theaters. It's kind of doing a slow rollout, so definitely give it a chance. It's a very demanding experience in terms of watching a movie, but and emotionally may not be for everyone. But yeah, I think it's certainly one of the again more unique films in terms of the film form, like as an experience. Like this is like the level that movies can like operate at, and I feel like it's not something that you see that often in any given year. So it's hard to
Mhm.
compare it to anything else on this list, but I think it certainly is up on the upper echelon for me.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said. However, we did have different feelings overall.
Right.
I think for me, you hinted at it, but I feel like it just got repetitive a bit.
Yeah.
This was still like a 3 out of 5 for me. So I didn't dislike it by any means. But it was like, I see what you're doing, I get what you're doing, and then it just kept doing it. So I don't mean to hurt your heart with that, but I
Like I said,
still
I can understand that perspective for sure, because I also can agree. I think that's what holds it back from like being a total like masterpiece or like super elevated or anything, is that I think that the concept and like the way it's kind of strewn together, these different sequences, I think yeah, I think that can be a little grating at times.
but for me, very different vibes for my number 4. But similar themes in that you did not connect with this one. My number 4, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. Saw this twice in theaters back over the summer, and was extremely hyped for it going in after Mission Impossible Fallout being one of the best action movies ever, at least of the last 20 years. And with that being said, was excited, skeptical, nervous, whatever, for like how they're going to top that, how they're going to continue moving forward with this franchise. But I think the second viewing that I had confirmed for me that this was not just like, oh, big fun action sequences, a lot of fun, a lot of hype, but instead that I really did respect and appreciate this movie all the way throughout. I
Hmm.
think that it was, we saw Tom Cruise drive off the mountain 8 million times in promo materials for this, but I feel like there were still quite a few big impressive action sequences. One of my favorites, not even being a massive set piece, was just the airport sequence, the chase through there. I thought that was great tension, great stress and thrills, all without blowing anything up in a crazy manner or diving off the side of a mountain or on a speeding train. I think the second time that I saw this definitely helped with some of those murkier elements of like the entity and everything that this movie has that may have been confusing on a first watch or not as fleshed out. But having seen it like with the context and rewatching it, definitely cleared things up for me. Loved Haley Atwell as a new addition here. Loved Palm Clementif as another new character. Justice for Ilsa, but had a lot of fun with this one and was very, very I was not let down by, as some people might have been, by this movie.
Ah, yes, some people, Zach.
Who could I be talking about?
Can't imagine who that would be, but I'll let you have your joy with that.
I'm sure we'll be circling back to this in a bit.
My number three pick was The Holdovers. Talked about this a little bit earlier. Just echoing everything Zach said and reiterating that I think in terms of the performances, the writing, overall direction, and the vibes, if nothing else, I think this is definitely one of my favorites and one of the best films of the year. And um, I'll have a little bit more thoughts about it later on in the show, I think. But what's your number three pick, Zach?
Number three, Creed 3. This was one that I saw back in March, and has held down one of the top spots on my list since then. Got to see this with friends of the podcast, Jake Lawler and Josh Martin, at the Chinese Theater in Los Angeles on this massive IMAX screen. So quite an experience there, and just was blown away by it. Michael B. Jordan making his directorial debut here, and just absolutely lighting it up with this, the actions, the thrills, the drama, everything about this. Jonathan Majors, obviously, all of his, real life things aside, in this movie is an imposing force. Is a very talented actor and delivers a great performance opposite of Michael B. Jordan, playing a very different style character than what we get to see with Adonis Creed. I've always been a big fan of this franchise, and I love the way that it's able to make you, feel like you're watching a sporting event, feel like you want to stand up and cheer. And I think this movie continued to do that. I'm excited to see where this continues to go, where Michael B. Jordan grows as a director and an actor. But this is just a knockout punch, if you will.
I never never ended up seeing this one. I did watch the original Creed for the very first time this year. I thought it was great. I didn't think it was like one of the best movies I've ever seen. Like some people hype it up to be. And I don't know. There's something about sports movies for me that I find very difficult to get into and like invested in. And so I don't know if I'll ever like really go down the full path of Creed or Rocky, but I've seen the original Rocky. I think it's a great movie, just like Creed. But yeah, I'm glad that lived up to the hype.
I will say, I think that some of the criticism that I've seen from people about Creed 3 is like, you can't have Creed without Rocky. For me, not being someone, like, I've seen the original Rocky. I think I might have seen Rocky 2, but
Yeah.
I haven't seen 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, whatever. So I don't have like a strong affinity for them to
Yeah,
take that kind of approach where like,
you're that
it's a
guy.
Creed movie, it's not a Rocky movie. Like, he did his part, told his story. Now we're moving on.
Yeah.
But that was number 3 for me. I know we've got interchangeable number 1s and 2s.
Ew. Ew.
So let's talk about your 2 and my number 1 first, Johnny. What is it?
It is Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. And I mean, how high were the hopes coming into this year for this movie? I mean, they were pretty through the roof, I would say, coming off of one of the most beloved, not just animated movies, but one of the most beloved movies, period, of the last 5 or 10 years, I would say, in the original Spider-Verse movie. And so, yeah, very high expectations, and somehow it like surpassed them. I mean, I would say for me, I think they're both like masterpiece movies. But I honestly think in terms of the animation and like how incredible the action is in this movie and the score from Daniel Pemberton and the character designs, the new characters that they introduce, for my money, I think I would just slightly put Across the Spider-Verse above Into the Spider-Verse for the reasons I mentioned. And I think that the fact that it did meet and exceed so high expectations just speaks to how good this movie actually is.
Absolutely. I mean, we're talking about with Guardians, what comic book movies should be. Obviously, this is animated, but this is like the pinnacle of what they should be.
Yeah.
Just the creativity, the design, I remember when I watched this in theaters, my Letterboxd review was that I don't think my mouth closed the entire time I was watching it. I was just constantly in awe, like mouth agape at what I was witnessing on screen, because it takes, like you said, everything from that first movie, and I agree, it elevates it. I think I love the deeper dive into Gwen here. I think Haley Steinfeld is amazing.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah, the performances
emotion.
I think are all like
Oh yeah,
the first one too, arguably.
yeah, and then when you throw in those new characters like a Daniel Kaluuya, um, or just to continue to expand this universe, not only in the design of, Hobie, or Oscar Isaac's
Jason
character.
Schwartzman as the
um yeah, the Spot, like
great villain.
it's expanding like in character quality, but also like just across the, but like they're good, important, profound characters, but also like at the same time they're just like brilliantly designed. And it's, for this being across the Spider-Verse, and I know originally the name was like part one and part two, and then they changed it.
Yeah.
Um, this, like, I was so shocked when this ended, because I was like, this was 2 hours or whatever it was, and it felt like it
Two
was like
hours and like
30.
20 minutes. Yeah.
It was long, but it felt so quick, and I was so invested in it that I was like, man, I could have kept watching for another 2 hours. Like, I know you get so lost in it that you forget that it's like going to be this cliffhanger, this part one.
Yeah.
And man, I am just like, so, if hopes were high for this one, they're like exponential for Beyond the Spider-Verse. I know there's been like all the drama and the strikes and the delays and talks about animation and everything. Like, take your time, make this movie the perfect way to end this trilogy, because
Yeah.
one and two have just been like knocked out of the park so far.
Yeah. And don't crunch and abuse your animators either,
That
please.
too.
um, but yeah, I mean, this, when it's all said and done, I mean, this could very well be the greatest of all time in terms of like a superhero or comic book movie trilogy for the time being, anyway, if they nail the landing. And just one of the best trilogies, period. So, yes, very high hopes. Take your time. We can wait a year, 2 years, whatever. And we had to wait half a decade for this one. So, I see no issue there. But yeah, I'm glad we are in agreement. It's, I got to say, as we get to the number one pick here, for me anyway, and your number two pick, we may have a different varying tastes or opinions on a lot of different things, but the fact that we have the same is swapped in order, but the top two films in terms of what we thought was the best or our favorites, I think is pretty impressive. So I gotta shout that out. But number one for me is gonna be, and at the beginning of the year, I don't know what I would have said or thought if I had known this, but it is
Well,
Christopher Nolan.
you would have had Dune Part Two.
It would have had Dune Part Two, yeah, most likely. But it ended up being Christopher Nolan and Oppenheimer. And I had, again, this is one of those movies, I think, very high expectations across the board. Maybe some people were a little bit more timid because of maybe Tenet, not loving Tenet as much as his usual movies, or even Dunkirk. I know some people are a little bit more split on or found a little underwhelming, maybe somehow. I did not love Tenet as much as his other movies, but I still thought it was a great time. And I think Dunkirk is an outright masterpiece. So why was I so I guess, scared that this might not be a good movie or a great movie or an amazing movie? I think it came down to the historical biopic side of it. I just thought,
Mhm.
why is he doing this? Like, I never would have expected him to do a movie like this. Little did I know the way he was going to approach and write and direct and produce this movie, and the way he Christopher Nolan does the whole thing is why I never should have doubted him in the first place, and it's also why I think it's the best movie of the year, best movie of the decade, and one of the best movies I've probably ever seen, from beginning to end, top to bottom. Zach, what would you? Obviously, you're in some agreement. You have it as your number two pick.
No, absolutely. I'm the same way. I was a bit hesitant. Like, I didn't know how I was gonna like this going
And
in.
I got to say real quick to cut you off, Zach. You were the first one to see this, like in our group.
Very
Up,
true. I
up
was the one
for
that said, "Turn me up, Christopher Nolan." This is like a certified banger, and
yeah.
that you hearing that from me and me being
I was
probably the
shook.
most skeptical of our group, it was like,
I
okay,
was
we
shook.
might have something here.
Absolutely. When you came out of that screening and sent that message, it was late because it was a long showing and it started like 7 or something. And you sent that, I was like, no freaking way. And that was around the same time. It was that night that the social reactions were coming out. So it wasn't just you that was beaming about it. I mean, I was kind of like a flood of like, oh my God, like, did he actually do something like unbelievable here? Because again, up to that point, I was very reserved. I was nervous. Still had to see it for myself, but yeah, you getting to see it and to have such praise for it was very promising and affirming, I think, and a good omen.
Yeah, it's like I said, it was something that I was skeptical of going in. Not skeptical of like Christopher Nolan, obviously, like the track record speaks for itself. But as you were talking about your hesitations of like Tenet or
Yeah.
Dunkirk, like it was very much the same for me, being like the historical biopic nature.
3 hours.
Because when you look at it, it's like, okay, the guy who did the Dark Knight trilogy, who did Interstellar, The Prestige, all of the Inception, all of these like super fun thriller sci-fi movies. Like, why is he doing is this going to
Yeah.
be a Mank situation of to talk about David Fincher again?
Yeah.
And especially for me being someone who is not as high on Dunkirk, just because, and that was the closest comparison as far as like subject matter here. But
Right.
so to come out of that and just be blown away, the pacing is unreal, even at 3 hours. The fact that we introduced 8 million characters and all of them are so good, all of them are so important, and it just like keeps on ripping as far as the pace of the plot, and we're just like moving along, talking to this person, talking to that person, getting everything set up, and it never loses steam from like an interest perspective or a timing perspective, anything like that. And just grabs you and keeps you enthralled the entire way through. When I rewatched this at home on the 4K, Rebecca had not seen this in theaters with me, and I was hesitant about how she would feel about it, and she was a big fan as well, which I think even just like further goes to show that it doesn't matter your taste. Like, a good movie is a good movie, and
Yeah.
pretty much everybody can get behind this one.
Yeah. I mean, I think I tweeted this. I've been very outspoken in terms I think this is the best movie of the year. And also there has never in the history of the Academy Awards, of the Oscars, has there been an easier layup than giving this movie Best Picture. And I like, art is subjective. You got the holdovers, you got Poor Things, Barbie, etc. But I mean, in terms of how many people would be excited and happy to see this succeed and get that high level of recognition, I can't think of a better movie. And I think a year from now, 5, 10, 20 years from now, if they don't give this Best Picture, it's going to look so bad. Like, it does, and it's going to hurt whatever movie would get it instead. Would their its legacy, I feel like, would be more hurt than anything. Because it'd be one of those movies where like, oh, like you look back and you're like, oh, that won Best Picture, right? And it was like, oh no, it was XYZ. And you're like, oh, what the hell? So that's a whole other element to it. Obviously, at the box office, it was literally an unbelievable, like, otherworldly success. Like, never in a million years would I have thought that could happen. $950 million, one of the biggest movies, not just of this year, but it's Christopher Nolan's pretty much his biggest movie outside of the Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises. So, yeah, it's just kind of a miraculous achievement in my opinion. And in terms of experience, there's nothing like it for me. This movie, when I think about it, when I see a clip, when I hear a piece of the music, I mean, there's something in my body, it just spikes, and I'm like, I gotta watch this movie. Like, I'm dying to watch this movie, and it's a 3 hour historical biopic. It shouldn't be possible, but it is, and that's why it's my number one movie of the year.
Retweet, except number two. But I love, like you said, 1 and 2 interchangeable.
Those are the only two 5 out of 5s for me that I've given. Well, I take that back. I did give the holdovers a 5 last night, which is its own thing. But Yeah, and that's a pretty
Those
it's a
are
high
those
bar.
are also my two 5 out of 5s this year. Creed, my number three movie, was a 4.5, 90 out of 100. But I've got Oppie at a 95 out of 100 and Spider-Man at 97 out of 100. So
Whew.
good stuff right there.
Heat.
There you have it. The top 10, our favorite movies of 2023. And now we're going to give out some awards. So back in July, we gave out the 2023 so far superlatives at the halfway point in the year. We were looking at, those first 6 months, all of the things that had really moved us up to that point. Now we've got another 6 months. We're checking back in on those categories now that the year has come to an end. Some categories we got rid of because, what are you looking forward to most for the rest of 2023 doesn't really make sense anymore. We're going to have a whole different episode looking ahead at 2024. So I didn't want to get ahead of ourselves there. Best part one was one of the categories where we talked about Spider-Man. We talked about Fast X. We talked about Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning part one. Since then, unless I'm wrong, the only part one that has come out is Rebel Moon, which neither of us saw nor had any interest in. So I think we'd both, having just named Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse one of the top two movies of the year, I don't think any changes would have been made there. So I'm going to remove that category. But let's look at some of these. And we'll also be able to share what we had as our award winner back in July. So first category here is biggest surprise. Looking at 2023 as a whole, it can be a person, it can be a movie, it can be a movement, a genre, anything that was the biggest surprise for you. For me, back in July, I said the R-rated comedy. And I also I split it between the R-rated comedy and Jury Duty. Still love Jury Duty. Great show, hysterical. But my biggest surprise has been narrowed down to one, and the R-rated theatrical comedy still stands. At that time in the year, we had No Hard Feelings, we had Joyride. Now with another 6 months, add in Bottoms, add in Anyone But You. While it was PG-13, I'm gonna lump in Theater Camp. Just so pleased to be seeing so many, like, not necessarily big budget, but big theatrical comedies being made with either a hard PG-13 or an R rating, to be able to make these kind of movies, have people show up for them and see them on the big screen. I feel like it's been for so long R-rated comedies were, relegated to Netflix or streaming or something like that. I mentioned 2019 earlier in the year, or earlier in the podcast, talking about some of those movies. But like a Booksmart, like I think, not that it was like a fantastic movie, but Good Boys, I think, was in 2019. Seeing these big vulgar comedies, No Hard Feelings is fantastic. Just missed out on my top 10. I think it was definitely in the top 20. Joyride, I think, was 25. Bottoms, Anyone But You was not even like spectacular, but I'm gonna go see an R-rated rom-com. You better believe it. I will be there. So shout out the R-rated theatrical comedy. Hope we can continue this momentum. And another one from 2019, Long Shot. Love that movie. But yeah, I want to see more of these. I want to keep making them and keep showing up for them. Honorable mention for my biggest surprise. We already talked about it a lot, but Oppenheimer, for those reasons I mentioned of, being skeptical, Dunkirk, yada, yada, all that stuff, but was thrilled by it and loved it, but wanted to share some love to a different genre here after we just dubbed Oppenheimer the best movie. Johnny, what you got?
Yeah, absolutely. So the midway point, biggest surprises for me, I had Dungeons and Dragons, which I thought was a super fun movie, and a standout. It's certainly based on my expectations. And then Shrinking on Apple TV Plus was a great first half of the year kind of show that I really didn't know anything about, and then it just kind of surprised me, and I definitely recommend that. For this kind of second half of the year, though, I would have to say, hey, Godzilla X Kong, that's a 2024 release, right? Like, no reason that Godzilla should be popping up or making any waves, but here we are, Godzilla is more prominent than he's been in any recent years I can remember. And that's because of primarily Godzilla minus one, which is the Toho Japanese film. It's come out this year, which has just been uh, incredibly well received, critically, from Godzilla fans, from general moviegoers, at the Japanese, box office, obviously, but then also in the US and other parts of the world. So it's awesome to see a movie like this getting some of this recognition. Godzilla is a long-standing franchise, long-standing character, been around for like 70 plus years, I think. And the fact that this might be his biggest, best movie in some ways, I think is pretty amazing. And then on top of that, he's also making an appearance for the first time ever on the small screen, at least in the US or on streaming. And that's with Monarch, Legacy of Monsters on Apple TV Plus. Um, and kind of more in a cameo capacity, obviously. You don't want to go too full blown with Godzilla. There's other big monsters to focus on and get some shine too. But from what I've seen in that show so far, some of the most memorable and impressive moments to me have been when Godzilla does appear. So yeah, the last couple of months has just been kind of kind of unsuspecting Godzilla resurgence. And I think that's really cool because as a kid, I was really big into Godzilla. That was kind of some of the first couple movies I really remember being really kind of a fanatic about. So to see a new Godzilla Japanese movie in theaters and to have it be as great as it was just a really fun surprise.
I still haven't seen Godzilla minus one, and like I said earlier, I am catching up on Monarch. So respect for the big fella, but can't weigh in. But lots of good surprises this year. Glad we have some that we're passionate about. But on the flip side, biggest disappointments. Back in July, I had Beau is Afraid. I mentioned my Midsummer t-shirt earlier, and so that movie, I had Hereditary as one of my favorites. Ari Aster, very excited, and Beau is Afraid did not hit the mark for me. A lot of that due to the previously mentioned, absurdity, surrealism, all that stuff. But I'm taking this a step further to the horror genre as a whole for biggest disappointment. I feel like this was a down year for horror on the big screen. Looking at my letterbox for 2022, I saw 14 horror movies, not all great, but a ton of options, a ton of good stuff to check out that were like big on the big screen or big streaming movies. Versus this year, I only saw 4 horror movies. The ones that I saw were good. I'm not fully including Beau is Afraid as horror. But let me see what all do we have here. Infinity Pool, I mentioned a lot of love for that early on. Scream 6 was still good. Megan was the first movie I saw and had a lot of fun with that. Like those were some good ones. But I need that volume up. It's such a good genre. I'm seeing Night Swim, which is, January and horror movies don't really usually promise great results, but that's what I thought about Megan last year, and it was one of my favorites. So I'm excited to kick off 2024 with hopefully something good, at least a movie, if not a good movie. But do better, horror. Do better.
Hey, yeah, that's I totally am in agreement with you there. You kind of, I'm not gonna say you stole my pick, Zach, but I was commenting that horror has been down considerably this year. I think it's been very disappointing, in pretty much every capacity. There are some decent flicks, but nothing outstanding in my opinion. Next year, though, good news. This looks like it could be one of the stronger years in recent memory for horror. So yeah, you got to kind of get that balance, I suppose. But I would say what I had in July is still the most disappointing elements of my entire year. Because they are so disappointing. Like there's really no way that you could get something worse for me. And that would be Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1, which is
My heart.
quite possibly my favorite film franchise. I'm a huge Tom Cruise fan, huge Mission Impossible fan. Fallout is an unmitigated masterpiece, in my opinion. And I thought that after years of waiting for this movie, half a decade between Fallout and Dead Reckoning, I thought it was just a letdown in virtually every department. I thought in terms of the direction, the acting, the writing, the stunts, the effects, the cinematography. There was not one element of this movie that I thought was as good as the more recent entries, unfortunately. So overall, I think you could still argue. I'm fine with people enjoying it, obviously, and no hard feelings. I just think it's so far below the standard that they have set for this franchise. Even as a maybe good or fine action film, that's not good enough for Mission Impossible, in my opinion. So that is the downside there, unfortunately. And then on the television side, back in
Pick me
July,
while I'm down, Johnny.
and in July, I said the same thing. Television wise, I loved and binged earlier this year Ted Lasso's season 1 and 2. Thought it was great, fantastic. Super fun character work, hilarious, sentimental. And I'm a soccer fan too, so they got a little hook in there as well.
It's
And
football, Johnny. It's
it
football.
came crashing down with season 3, which had some bright moments, had some decent peaks at times, but I thought, all told, top to bottom, just a very disappointing downgrade from the previous couple seasons. And again, I think that's an issue where you had Ted Lasso season 1 and 2 kind of pretty quick consecutively a few years ago. And then there's like a layoff, some things change with the writing, production issues, things like that. That can hurt hurt a movie or a show considerably, even when a lot of people don't realize it or know the details necessarily. So I think that was very much felt in this season, and I found it very unsatisfying. And unfortunately, as a show that I quickly came to love this year, it just I don't even think about it, in any capacity anymore. I'm just like, damn, they really dropped the ball there. So again, hard to top that emotional swing, I think.
Man, one of my favorite movies and one of my favorite shows. You're just
But
this feels personal.
even you would agree season 3 was the weakest, right?
I think it's the weakest of the three, but I still think
There you go.
it's one of the TV's next week. TV's next week. Don't get me ahead of myself. But I still ride for Ted Lasso. But MVP of the year, back when we were looking at this in July, we were riding high, at least I was, on Rebecca Ferguson. She had just come out in Mission Impossible and Dead Reckoning. She was in Silo. Dune Part 2 was on the horizon. That's a good resume, but because Dune got bumped to 2024, took her down a notch, no fault of her own, which opened the door for a new candidate here for me, and that's Ayo Edebiri. Just a brilliant actress, and listen to this. In 2023 alone, this resume: plays Sydney in The Bear season 2. Fantastic show, fantastic season of television, and a great character. She's starred in Bottoms, starred in Theater Camp, voiced a character in Across the Spider-Verse, voiced a character in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. She plays Missy in Big Mouth, so voiced that, and then also had 2 guest appearances on Abbott Elementary, which is another fantastic comedy. So girl was busy. And on top of that, she's like a Letterboxd darling, as one of the celebrities that actively has like a public Letterboxd account. And I feel like her reviews go viral. Or I just saw a post about, while we were recording this, she made a list of like the best farts in cinema. So
Wow.
in between making all of these great movies and TV shows, she's keeping the people entertained with her social media antics. So shout out to Ayo, big fan. Looking forward to more Bear, looking forward to more Spider-Verse, looking forward to more Abbott Elementary. Who knows if she'll be a part of that, but just a great year and a promising young star.
Yeah, she is pretty incredible, hilarious, very talented. And I'm definitely someone who I was not familiar with at the beginning of this year. But as someone who has binged The Bear and loved Bottoms, honorable mention, shout out to that movie. Mutant Mayhem I thought was really fun as well. She's definitely made an impact, and I'm really excited to see Spider-Verse. I may have missed it. You might have mentioned I wasn't paying attention, but what was her role in that again?
She was I can't remember her name, the computer person, like in the spider headquarters.
Okay, gotcha. I think that wasn't her. I think that was Amanda Stenberg or Steinberg.
Um, she is it the AI assistant then maybe?
Oh, man.
Glory Grant in Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Who's Glory Grant? Oh, never mind. I take it back.
We're
Gloria Grant.
retracting it. We're retracting it.
She's in Gwen Stacy's band.
Oh,
So
is she?
a much more minor role.
Yeah, that's
But
still. I mean,
still on
get
the
that credit.
resume.
Yeah, I mean, wow.
I'm
Okay,
I'm
awesome.
sorry. I embarrassed myself there. Devastating stuff.
No, I mean you were right. She is in that. That's wild. Wow. Yeah. So I mean, it's hard to top that. I mean, that's MVP. I think we can agree on her. But I will mention, it's not like she disappeared or was out for an super extended period of time. But we had not seen or heard really much at all from Emma Stone since Cruella came out, which was in May of 2021, I believe.
Underrated movie. I liked Cruella. I'll say it.
Still haven't seen it, but I think she's obviously an Oscar-winning performer, very talented, has been around the industry for a long time now. But I think she really didn't have a comeback this year, but she returned in some capacity in a big way. And just in the last couple of months, she kind of came in here and I feel like I've heard and seen more of Emma Stone in the last couple of months than, like I said, like the last couple of years combined, like probably. And I think that is very much to her credit. That is with Poor Things, of course, premiering at Venice Film Festival, and her having a starring role in that. Not only a starring role, but her first, I think, big producing role. If it gets nominated, as it will likely be for Best Picture, she'll get a Oscar nomination for that participation there. And then that's huge in terms of on film, but then in terms of television, she's also executive producer and a star of The Curse with Nathan Fielder. Benny Safdie also involved with that show on Showtime and Paramount Plus. Really loving that show. One of the standouts of the year for me, kind of coming in here late. I think it was some of Nathan Fielder's best work. And the interesting overlap between these two, in my opinion, is Emma Stone, La La Land, Easy A, Crazy Stupid Love, some of these roles that you kind of like understand, like you see her in them, you understand like what she's going for. The Favorite, I think, is something where she kind of stood out and did something a little different and maybe daring in some regard. And I think that arguably is probably her best performance up to Poor Things. But with Poor Things and The Curse, she is entering a whole nother level in terms of what she is willing to do, what she is able to do in my eyes as a performer. I never would have guessed that she could have pulled off what she does as Bella Baxter. She's totally fearless. Her physicality is incredible. What she can do in terms of obviously as a producer, she's showing her chops there. She had a big, just what I've seen behind the scenes in an interview, she had a big role in making that movie happen and the way that it kind of came together. And then in The Curse, again, very different from Bella Baxter, but it has that kind of faux reality TV element to it. Almost like, The Rehearsal, for example. And I think she pairs so well with Nathan Fielder. Again, that's something I never would have guessed. And she is so daring and she is so cringeworthy and like just not afraid to do anything. And she has a great comedic side to her that she's been exploring more and more. And of course, she's a fantastic dramatic actor. So it's just been a really fun resurgence and just a reminder that she is one of the most talented actors in Hollywood, period. And is going to be continuing to do some fun stuff. We know that she has another Yorgos Lanthimos film coming out next year, Kind of Kindness. Which should be another banger. And again, I don't know too much about that, but she's definitely on the upswing. So I think that's great. And if someone with her esteem and her weight in Hollywood being able to produce and star in some of these more daring projects and put her name and weight behind it, I think is important. And so I'm excited to see what she does, moving forward.
respect for Emma Stone. Big fan, always have been. But who is the breakout star of 2023? I think it would be very easy to say Ayo Edebiri, having just mentioned her and her lengthy list of accomplishments. However, because of the Bear season 1, because she's been on Big Mouth for a couple years, she definitely took it to a next level this year. But I wanted to not just lump all the awards on one person. For me, this was not an award we gave out in July, by the way. So this is a brand new award here. The inaugural breakout star of 2023. I'm going Greta Lee. And I think my reasoning, I was looking at like a body of work and like a couple things this year. Past Lives obviously was fantastic. We both mentioned it as honorable mentions here for best movies of the year, and that is due in large part to her role. And then when you throw in The Morning Show season 3, this is a show that I've been a big fan of. She was in I can't remember if she was in season 1, but she was definitely in season 2, but really took on a more prominent role in season 3. So to have like a big streaming TV series like that and a big movie that is gonna have some awards play here, very excited to see her continue to flourish and get some shine. So I'm going Greta Lee. Johnny, who are you taking?
Hey man, you wanted to go all to bat for Ao with Spider-Verse, and Greta Lee's in Spider-Verse. You didn't even mention that.
You know what? My Spider-Verse cast is just all messed up.
Hey, that's okay. She had a tiny, like kind of a smaller role, but she definitely has had a breakout year, and I was of course very moved and taken with her in Past Lives. So shout out to her there. I had a few different ideas. I mean, there's so many great ones. I voted for Breakout with the NCFCA. I did Charles Melton for May December, which I think is because of just how incredible his performance is. But he's been in Hollywood, he's been in the business, he's been in Riverdale for years now. So he's had some extra movement. Who I ended up deciding to go with for this was Dominic Sessa, for the simple fact that
Love.
This man has literally never acted in anything on screen, at least, in front of a camera, until he was found when making The Holdovers. And they put him through the ringer to make sure that he could actually lead or be at least a big part in a movie. I think they said like 6 or 7 auditions or something to make sure that it wasn't a fluke. But he is, I mean, the only way to describe it is a natural. I mean, he can do anything and everything, it seems like, in this role and in this movie. And to go from nothing to this, I mean, is pretty exceptional. I would absolutely love to see him get an Oscar nomination, Best Supporting Actor. I don't know if that's going to happen necessarily, but I think he's absolutely deserving to be in that conversation. So definitely a shout out to him. And again, similar to some of these others, what he does next, who knows? He's still a college student, I believe. He goes to, after getting this role and performing this, I believe he's been in New York, going to Carnegie Mellon. So very interested to see where his life and career goes. Obviously can't put any expectations on him, but I would love to see him do more work, of course. So
absolutely. I think I'm pretty sure I voted for him for NCFCA as well, because with this, since in our awards we're taking TV and film into account, which is why I went Greta Lee. But when you're strictly looking at film, he was my choice. Love The Holdovers, love his character. And I know I mentioned the OC book earlier. Angus is very Seth Cohen coded, so I love seeing a revival of this character, this archetype. Next up, another brand new award, the inaugural streaming service of the year. And we have different picks here, and I can totally see your justification. But first off, I went with Apple TV Plus. We'll get into TV more next week, but without naming names, 5 of my top 10 TV shows of the year were Apple originals. So when you're putting up success at that rate, where you're 50% of the best shows of the year, that's huge. And then throw in Killers of the Flower Moon. You can't stream it there for free yet, but producing this, putting this movie out there as one of the best movies of the year is what put this over the top for me. You've got so many great shows over there. It's really becoming a prestige streaming service that's just collecting things and building a reputation for being quality over quantity. And I've been loving a lot of what I've seen over there. Again, we'll get into TV and specifics a bit more next week. But Johnny, what's yours?
Yeah, I mean those are valid points there. It's hard for me to give Killers of the Flower Moon and Napoleon too much weight in that conversation because they technically aren't on Apple TV Plus yet.
But they helped make them.
But they helped make them. But we'll see how that improves their sub numbers early next year, hopefully once they're on the service. But in terms for me, it's interesting because HBO and Max, they were on an incredible run from House of the Dragon to The White Lotus to Last of Us to Succession. I mean, that's pretty unparalleled. But two of those shows obviously being in 2022, however, been a bit of a down year, I think some people would say, especially in the latter half of the year. Nothing like really big, not anything to like tune in weekly.
There's no Sunday night.
There was no Sunday night special. But that first half of the year with The Last of Us, probably the biggest, arguably best new show of the year, and then Succession, arguably the best show of the year, back to back in that first half. That alone could probably top anything. But then when you have Barry, which was also going on around that time during Succession, closing out that series as well. And I thought did it on a really high note, unlike that show on Apple TV Plus we talked about earlier. I think that, and then The Righteous Gemstones coming in with season 3. And again, them knocking it out of the park. So funny in the latter half of the year. Those are 4 like high level bangers in my opinion. And I think that puts them over the edge for me.
I was struggling myself when I was making this decision because, like I said, Apple was 5 of my top 10 shows. However, 1, 2, and 3 were all Max. So I am completely behind you. I was trying to like put a weighting, like a scale on this of like if it's 10 points for 1, 9 points for 2, 8 points for like who has the better average score.
Yeah.
But then I took Killers of the Flower Moon into account, and that's what put it over the top to have movies and TV like that. But no, Max is still, Apple TV is coming in hot, coming in strong, but Max is still the place to be, I think, as the best all around. But it was a great year for Apple, so respect for them. Here we go. The last significant award that we're giving out. The more people need to see this award. This was one that we did last time in July. At the time, I went with Megan and Silo. 1 movie, 1 TV. And I'm switching up my movie. Megan's still great. But because, Johnny, your July pick for movie was Infinity Pool, I was one of the people who needed to see it. I saw it. Now I'm also preaching the good word of Infinity Pool. More people need to check that out. It was an absolute unhinged movie, and I'm glad that I caught it when I did, having not seen it from January through the entire year, to finally watch it at the end of the year. Love that. Honorable mention to Theater Camp. It was my number 10 of the year. Talked about it earlier. Go stream it on Hulu. And on the TV front, I'm still sticking with Silo because Apple put out a banger with that one. Rebecca Ferguson's fantastic. It's a lot of fun. It's a good thriller mystery. And excited to see that show, that universe continue to expand.
Yeah. I'm very glad that I got you on the Infinity Pool hive. Happy to see that. And Silo, I totally agree. I think underrated in a lot of respects. Very fun, very well done sci-fi show on Apple this year. For me, on the film side, I had Infinity Pool, as you mentioned, and Jury Duty was my mid-year pick, which I hadn't heard too many people talk about, at least at that time. I've heard a little bit more talk about it, I feel like, as the year went on. Still recommend that, obviously. But on the film side, latter half of the year, gotta go with American Fiction. It's had a limited release in the middle of December, and it's been slowly expanding, I think. If you can catch it in a theater, if it's playing near you, highly recommend it. I think it's one of the best films of the year. Certainly, I mentioned it in my honorable mentions at the beginning of the show, and definitely a great film. Very well written, very well directed. Cord Jefferson directorial debut. He's my, I think, directorial first timer of the year. So yeah, go check it out. Fantastic ensemble as well. It's led by Jeffrey Wright, but the whole cast is stellar. And then on the TV side, I got to back, and this is proving, how good Apple TV Plus is. I got to back For All Mankind. They're on season 4. And it just blows my mind how good this show is. And like no one talks about it. I don't know what the numbers are for people actually watching it, but man, it's a very, very fun sci-fi show. And the way it's evolved from season 1 to 4, I think has just been very impressive and very unique in terms of that kind of time span as opposed to anything else I've really seen on TV. So yeah, that's my recommendation. Go check it out. Give it a shot, especially if you're a sci-fi fan or kind of a historical fiction fan or alternate history fan. I think that you will really enjoy it. And it's got some great melodrama. And the production side, the effects and everything are always top notch. So Apple spares no expense, it seems. And I wish that this show got a little bit more shine.
Well, there you have it. There are the 2023 Inside the Film Room superlatives. The final 2, favorite movie, we already covered that. You know what number 1 is across the board. Spider-Man for me, Oppenheimer for Johnny. Favorite show was also one in July. But as we've said all episode, you'll have to tune in next week. No spoilers as we break down the best TV shows of 2023 in our countdown. Before we wrap up here, heading into 2024, it's time to take a look ahead at our 2024 bold predictions. No guts, no glory. Let's get crazy. What's going on in the pop culture world? I've got a couple here. Feel free to weigh in on any that you agree with, disagree with, whatever. Number 1, not movies or TV related. Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce are getting engaged. Mark my words. I have a strong feeling about this. I think I'm a Swiftie. I love them together. They look so happy. I'm a full-fledged believer in the conspiracy that they've been together far longer than the public knew about. So I wouldn't be surprised by end of year, next December around Taylor's birthday, we get a ring pop, and they're gonna be, Travis is getting up there. I think Jason Kelsey's probably gonna retire soon. Travis could go out on top if the Chiefs have a good year and then just become a professional Swiftie, professional groupie. I can see it. But I know I've got a couple more than you. So do you want me to do a couple? Then we toss it over to you.
Yeah, go for it.
Cool. All right. Next up, Paul Mescal. We were talking about him earlier with All of Us Strangers. I think he's going nuclear superstar mode, courtesy of Gladiator 2. He's been on the come up the last couple years. Obviously like Normal People, After Sun, All of Us Strangers, all being like more quiet dramas, but been, within like the film community, within people that know movies and TV, he's been making a name for himself. He, dated Phoebe Bridgers, got into the mainstream culture a little bit there. Things got messy, but still he was just like becoming more prominent. And I think with Gladiator 2 on the horizon, I think it's really going to launch him into a household name. In a similar, maybe I think a comp here would be, so I might walk this back a little bit from like global, like I think he's on his way to that. But I think like Gladiator 2 would put him in like the same way that like Glenn Powell like rocketed to celebrity after Maverick, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's very fair. I think I agree with that one. I think it's a good call. That Gladiator movie is obviously like a year away, but he's been slowly, surely on the come up. And he's very talented, very promising as a talent. So I think that he will deserve that big break. And I think Gladiator 2 is primed up to be a big box office hit. It's Ridley Scott. The whole cast is stacked from Denzel to Pedro Pascal. I very much anticipate that being, one of the big movies of the year. And with him in the lead, I think that it'll make sense that more and more people will get behind him, and hopefully it'll open up even more doors. Because it seems like he's willing to do just about anything.
That he is. I'm excited for it. Johnny, hit me with one of yours here.
Yeah, so my big one, my big, I guess, boldish one that I have, but I've been saying this for like years, like since the movie got greenlit, and that's that after like 2.5-ish years of waiting, we're getting Dune Part Two, first film with the HBO simultaneous release day and date, and also pandemic effects, were heightened at that point in 2021. Made 400 million worldwide at the global box office. 100 million domestically. That was good enough to get a sequel, obviously, but I think all things considered, with the expanded cast, you got Austin Butler, Florence Pugh, Zendaya's presence is even bigger. Chalamet's a bigger star now. Um, and all the other elements in terms of the release date and whatnot, marketing. I think that Dune Part 2 is going to make twice as much as the first one. And at the end of the year will be one of the top three global hits. I think that this is like an 800 million plus player potentially. I think it's going to have, it has a great release date. I think it's going to have great legs. And of course will be a big awards player as well, which will help it out. I think maybe to have a little bit of resurgence maybe later in the year. So yeah, I'm optimistic. I know that generally you wouldn't expect that. Maybe Villeneuve's never had a movie even close to that big. But and maybe it's a bold prediction, but I think that it makes sense.
I can get behind it. As much money as that's going to make, it's not enough. David Zaslav out at Warner Bros. Discovery. This man has been making a fool of himself since he took over. I think something's going to happen. It's going to be the straw that broke the camel's back. And, you can't just keep canning movies. You can't have people that are just, you're making Warner Bros. As a studio unattractive to people like Denis Villeneuve that are bringing you these mega hits. This may be more of a wish than a prediction, because if things are working, if Dune is a hit, it makes it harder to get rid of him. But I think it's going to happen. And while we're talking about things over at Warner Bros. At HBO, Euphoria, I know we're season 3's in production or pre-production, whatever stage it is. I think Euphoria by the end of the year, it's not going to come out. I don't think it's slotted until 2025 anyway. I think it's going to be like quietly, slowly, like swept under the rug, and like it's just not going to be a thing anymore. The Idol was just like a disaster. There's been so much just drama around Euphoria. Zendaya is just an ever rising star. Same with Sydney Sweeney's taking off to like a whole new level. Like people are getting too big for this. Jacob Elordi, like I feel like it's going to make it more and more difficult to come back to this show. And then you've also got, tragic real life events like Angus Cloud passing. Like it's just going to be too messy, too much of a problem to try and right the ship here and keep this thing going. So I think Euphoria is going to be donezo, which is a bummer because season 1 was great. Season 2 was awful. Bonus cancellations. Drake is going to get canceled. I don't know if it's not going to be like career ending, but I think there's going to be some sort of just like backlash for Drake. And then Ryan Reynolds, this man's been doing his little shtick for too long. I think we're going to get like a mini cancellation.
Oh,
I don't know if it qualifies as like canceling, but there's going to be drama around him. There's going to be backlash. A lot of eyeballs on him with Deadpool being the lone Marvel movie. I don't know. We'll see. I feel like the public is just going to turn on him in a little. Maybe it's with drama with Blake Lively with his relationship. Who knows? We'll see. But yeah, Johnny, last one from you. What you got?
Unreal. I think those are solid. I will say about David Zaslav, I think because I feel like the movie slate next year is going to be a lot better for Warner Brothers. I think they're going to have some big hits, and then also I think Max overall the slate looks like it's going to be pretty promising. I feel like he will sneak out. I feel like he will survive. And then I think more of his decision making will be reflected in 2025 most likely, but we shall see. I would of course love to see him get the hell out of there. In terms of speaking of the like performance, my other big prediction, and I don't think this is really that bold at this point, given how 2023 went, But I think comic book movies will continue to decline in terms of performance and reception, overall audience interest. That's going to be kicked off here by Madam Web. I believe that's in February. It looks absolutely, excuse my language, fucking terrible. Um, Genuinely looks like it could be one of the worst movies of like the last several years, at least from a big studio. So I think that's going to kind of set the stage. Then you have Craven the Hunter, again, one of those weird Sony spin-off villain movies. I just don't see that doing particularly well either, especially based on the trailer we have so far. And then Venom 3. Sounds like this is going to be the last one in that trilogy anyway. Tom Hardy sounds like he's ready to move on, but I think I'm just seeing diminishing returns. You know, even Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, as well as that did, it wasn't the same as Volume 2. And Aquaman didn't make as much as the first one, and Captain Marvel, the sequel to that, didn't make as much as the original. So I just think we're seeing a diminishing return there. And then I think the biggest question marks, and maybe which will speak a little bit more on the genre, are going to be Deadpool 3 and then Joker 2, obviously. Those movies for Deadpool, those have always been big, like right around the 800 million mark. Obviously, this one you have Hugh Jackman returning for the first time since 2017 as Wolverine. I think that's going to draw in a lot of people. I think that could be an outlier in that regard because it's kind of like a little nostalgia baiting going on there. And then Joker, I think that's one could go either way. I don't see it being as big as the first, obviously. I don't see this necessarily making $1 billion. I think it could still make money, but I do think it's going to be another case of not reaching the same heights as the original. I think the musical element could be very cool, but I think it's probably going to throw some people off. We'll see how they deal with that in the marketing, obviously. But I think just in general, with one MCU movie this year, with one DC movie this year, and then these other kind of, you know, Sony offshoots, which I think look really, really unappealing. I think we're going to continue to see that genre in particular dive a little bit, which is part of why I think Dune is going to do so well. And I think it's probably going to be one of the bigger movies of the year, is because I don't think these comic book movies are really going to be making as much, you know, in terms of money or just being received as well.
It's interesting. I'm curious to see. I agree with this. I think Deadpool 3 will still be a hit just because people love that character. Unless Ryan Reynolds gets canceled. But like you said, Hugh Jackman, the nostalgia, the Wolverine element of it all. I'm interested to see Marvel. Like they cleared house, moved everything to 2025 or later, except for Deadpool. So I'm curious just to see like their takeaways. I think Deadpool's going to be an outlier. MCU's in shambles. This is going to come in. It's always been its own sort of standalone thing anyway. And this movie happens and makes that 800 million, does really well. And are they going to be like, oh, we did it, we fixed the MCU, and then like try and get back to like the horrible stuff that they've been feeding us? Or is it actually still are they gonna like be blinded by one shiny gem here, or are they gonna continue to like, you know, rework and refine stuff so that it actually does get better? Who knows? So hopefully it's not just like hopefully it's good. Hopefully it doesn't like trick them into thinking that everything is solved because they made one good movie. But I'm with you. I think it's going to be another down year. And then that'll also just be interesting to see if after a bad year this year and then a down year with less movies next year, if people are going to want to come back the following year, or if it's just the end of the era. But my last prediction here, this one's the long shot. This one is absolutely wild. Bold prediction. Like I said, no guts, no glory. We're going to get a Timothée Chalamet and Kylie Jenner pregnancy announcement. I think this man, Kylie Jenner's got what, 2 kids already? At least one, I think 2. I don't, they've been a thing for a while. It's been, I don't think that they're not like going to be married or anything like that, but right. I don't know, man.
Rule it out.
I will say though, Timmy is on the upward, like he's been on the upward trajectory for years. He's been, he's on the precipice of being the next big movie star if he's not already. So I could see him being extra, I could see him being extra careful with anything that could hold him back. But you know what? We're going for it here.
I think That's a very bold prediction. I will say that. I think I'm gonna have to disagree purely because he has proven to be very careful with his image and his decision making. Like, and he's been in the business for like 6+ years now.
Once the Kardashians get their hands in you, man.
So, and I mean, they've been together for like a while at this point. So unless he really wants to like settle down and like get together with her, I don't see him having a kid anytime soon. And I think also on the logistical
He
side,
will be on season 5 of the Kardashians though, because you know that shit was filmed during the strike. He had nothing else going on. I bet we get an appearance.
we'll see. We'll see. I don't know if he would consent to all that, but I think logistically though, he's gonna have Dune right away early this year. He's gonna have to do a lot of worldwide promotion for that. He'll be traveling, taking care of all that business, and then he should be hopping into very quickly after that filming the Bob Dylan film with James Mangold. I think that's his big focus this year in terms of what he's signed up to do. I don't think he really has anything else planned outside of that, but
Except making a baby.
he also has he has that, and then which he's obviously focused on, and then there's that other movie which he's apparently attached to where he said he's been training in ping pong to star in, which could be interesting. There's been rumors that he's going to be starring in a Benny Safdie movie or Safdie Brothers movie, so that could be on the agenda. So we'll see. I imagine that would be filming it in or around New York, most likely, just like the Bob Dylan film. So it'll be very interesting. He's got a busy year. Hopefully, for his sake, I'm hoping that a pregnancy is not part of that equation. But we'll keep keep an open mind.
I had to put this at the very end to, for those true listeners that tune in for the whole episode, they had to get a little reward after 2 hours of us. But there you have it, 2023 in the books. Thank you all for listening to this episode throughout the entire year. We appreciate the support. We've been doing this thing for years now. So for all those that continue to tune in and show love, we couldn't do it without you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. 100%. Another year in the books, another year of Inside the Film Room, growing, improving. We appreciate all the support, appreciate your spending your time listening, watching, whatever the case may be, reading on the website. Please stay tuned. We have a lot coming, obviously, in the new year. It's going to be a great year, I think, for film and television. Got a lot of stuff to look forward to. So keep up with us. And to do so, follow on Twitter, Instagram, like us on Facebook, and subscribe on YouTube. Can find all those accounts at Inside Film Room.
And while you're at it, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. We're on Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, YouTube, iHeart, anywhere you can find a podcast, we are there. Be sure to subscribe to our newsletter, The Rewind. You can find that on our social pages and our website. And be sure to come back next week for another episode where we'll be talking about the best TV shows of 2023 and also the first movie of 2024 in Night Swim. We'll see you then.